This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi Sai, we have a very important topic this evening, and I want you to fasten your seatbelts because the information you're about to learn is going to make you so happy and so joyous that you may hit the ceiling. So try to hold on to your seats, hold on to your socks. It's really the information we have is half love a fella. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Brachos on Daf Chesam and Aleph. Amar Rab Chia bar Ami Mishmei Deula. Miyayim shechara Beis Hamikdash. From the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Ein loy lahakadosh baruch hu ba'ilamai ela arba amoy shel halacha bavad. From the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the only thing the Rebbeinu Shalom has are the 4 amos, the 4 cubits of halacha. An amma is approximately 2 feet. So from the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, all God has in this world are the 4 amos of halacha, which implies that before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hashem had a lot more. He had many, many things. He had a lot of things. And now that the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, all the Rebbeinu Shalom has are the 4 amos of halacha. And the first question we have to ask is, what are the 4 amos of halacha? Why 4 amos? Okay, let's say a guy is sitting down, he's learning halacha. He's 8 feet tall. I mean, even the tallest guy, how tall could you be already? You're not going to be 4 amos tall. You're 3 amos, so 6 feet is 3 amos. What does it mean, the 4? So what do we mean? Horizontally? What, the guy's stomach extends for 4 amos? What does that mean? I mean, even if it extends 1 amma, the guy, but 4 amos? So if it's vertically, where we're dealing with giants, Hashem, after the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, all Hashem has is 8 feet people who learn halacha? Or people whose stomach extends for 8 feet? I mean, what's this Gemara talking about? And the implication of the Gemara is that before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hashem had more than the Dalet Amos of halacha. What else did he have? What else did the Rebbeinu Shalom have before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed that he lost? Okay. Another very interesting question is that every single morning we put on tefillin. And on the tefillin shorosh, you have on both sides of the tefillin shorosh, you have a shin on one side, you have a shin on the other side. Why in the world do we have 2 shins on the tefillin shorosh? What do they mean? What do they symbolize? What do they stand for? Okay. Very often in Shas, we have a Mishnah. And the Mishnah, there's something missing. There's a question on the Mishnah. There's a difficulty with the Mishnah. And the Gemara is saying, what's going on in this Mishnah? We can't understand it. The Mishnah is inexplicable. And the Gemara is forced to say a very well-known statement that's brought down in the Gemara Brachos, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and in many, many places in Shas. The Gemara says, Chisure mechsera v'hachi katani. The Mishnah is missing words, and this is what it means to say. Now what's that supposed to mean? The Mishnah is missing words? How can we say such a thing? I mean, we know who redacted the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi went through every single word of the Mishnah with a fine-tooth comb, made sure that every word is precise, every word is accounted for, and what? There are certain times where there are things missing in the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi? What does that mean, Chesura Mechsera? Imagine, you write a composition, and you get back the mark, 50. So the teacher says, what happened over here? Oh, I meant to write it. So the teacher says, I'm very happy you meant to write, but you didn't write it, so you fail. I mean, that was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's job. His job is to make sure that all the requisite words are there. So why are they not there? I mean, what does it mean? Chisurei mechsera b'hachi katani. In the Daf Yomi, they're learning now Masechta Pesachim. So you look at the first Mishnah, Masechta Pesachim, and the Mishnah is mind-boggling. The Mishnah says like this: Or la'arba'as ar boitkin es hachametz la'or haner. On the night of the 14th, we look for chametz by candlelight. However, it says the Mishnah, Kol makom she'ein machnisin by chametz. Any place that you don't bring chametz, ein tzarech bedika, you don't have to search. Okay? So you need to search your kitchen, your dining room, your living room. You don't have to search a place that you never bring chametz. Says the Mishnah, oh, in that case, uvema amru, so why'd they say, Beis shurais b'martef? that you need to check 2 rows in the cellar? Why'd they say that? If you don't have to check a place that you don't bring in chametz, why did they say 2 rows in the martef? What? Who's they? Where do we see anywhere, in any Mishnah, any comments about a martef, about a cellar, that the Mishnah is asking, where did we say, so why did we say you have to check the 2 rows in the cellar? I mean, nobody said anything about it. And why all of a sudden is the Mishnah a taisvis? The Mishnah just said, right, those who are familiar with learning Gemara appreciate the subtlety of this question. The Mishnah just said that in a place that you don't bring chametz, you don't have to check. And then the Mishnah says, so why did they say you have to check a martef? Who's they? What, the New York Times? Who's the Mishnah asking on? Where in any Tanaitic source did it ever say anything about a martef? Or what is this Mishnah supposed to mean? Okay, this is the question of the Shla HaKadosh, and we'll get back to this question. Every single day we daven Shemona Esrei 3 times, and we end off with the following tefillah. We say like this: Yiratzon milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. It should be your will, Hashem our God. Sheyibaneh Beis Hamikdash b'mheira v'yameinu. That you rebuild the temple speedily in our days, and you know what else? B'sein chalkeinu b'sarasecha, and give us our share in your Torah. So we make 2 requests: build the Beis Hamikdash, and give us Torah. I mean, what does giving us Torah have to do with the Beis Hamikdash? Hashem gave us the Torah before the Beis Hamikdash was built. I mean, the Beis Hamikdash stood, right? When was the Beis Hamikdash built? 480 years after the Torah was given. So Hashem gave us the Torah, and He waited 480 years to build the Beis Hamikdash. So obviously, you can learn Torah without a Beis Hamikdash. And when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Isai, we still have the Torah. We have Chumash, we have Mishnah, we have Gemara, we have Sifra, Sifri, Mechilta. We have the Torah. What are we missing? So what do the 2 things have to do with each other? Every day we daven, Ribbanu Shalom, build the Beis Hamikdash and give us the Torah. He gave us the Torah. We have the Torah. The Torah is on the shelf. Torah is munachas b'karen zavis. The Torah is right there. Anyone who wants to learn it is invited to learn it. So what's the tefillah? What does Torah have to do with the Beis Hamikdash? In fact, we say in Ne'ilah, in the Slichos of Ne'ilah, that nowadays, Yerushalayim is destroyed. All of its treasures have been taken into captivity. We have no Aron, we have no Menorah, we have no Eish Min HaShamayim, we have no Shechina, we have no Urim Betumim, we have no Ruach HaKodesh, we have no Shemen HaMishcha, we have no Tzintzenes Haman, we have no Matar Shel Aron, we have no Nevi'im, we have nothing, says the Slicha, Ein Shiur Rak HaTorah Azos. All we have is the Torah. So if we have the Torah, why are we asking Ribbanu Shalom, build the Beis HaMikdash and give us the Torah? We have the Torah. So the Eitz Yosef, one of the commentaries on the Siddur, he says what we mean to ask is like this: Ribbanu Shalom, build the Beis HaMikdash. And if you're not going to build the Beis HaMikdash, then at least let me come Wednesday night to a shiur. That's the tefillah. Ribbanu Shalom, build the Beis HaMikdash. And if you can't build the Beis HaMikdash, let me at least learn a little Gemara. Let me learn a little Mishnah, a little Torah. But still, it's a very difficult explanation for the tefillah. It almost sounds like understanding Torah goes hand in hand with the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And in fact, if you look at the end of Masechta Tamid, right, we're learning now, everyone's invited tomorrow morning. We have a shiur Masechta Midos in Rabbi Obeam Shul, 9:30 a.m. We're learning Masechta Midos. Mirz Hashem, after Masechta Midos, we're going to be learning Masechta Tamid. The second to last Mishnah Masechta Tamid is like this: Zehu Seder HaTamid LaAvodas Beis Elokeinu. Look at number 7. Everything learned until now is the order of bringing the Tamid in the Beis HaMikdash. Yehi Ratzon Sheyibaneh b'mheira v'yameinu. May it be the will of God that it should be built speedily in our days. This is the second to last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. Rabbi say, what's the very last Mishnah Masechta Tamid? We say it every Shabbos. Hashir shehalavim hayu oimrim bebeis hamikdash. Bayam harishon hayu oimrim Hashem ratzim loya. Bayam hasheni hayu oimrim, so on and so forth. But this Mishnah that we have in number 7 is the second to last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. Ask the Be'er Sheva, I don't get why this is the second to last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. It should be the very last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. And you know what? this is such a difficult problem. You know, the only person who could uncover this mystery is a carpenter, the son of a carpenter. The only one who could take apart and dissect this problem. You have to be a nagar. Make sure you punctuate it properly with the right nekudas, because nun gimel reish could be misread. Okay? The hamevin yavet. Nagar ben nagar. You have to be a carpenter, the son of a carpenter. Why? In other words, it's not enough if you're a Talmid Chacham, but you need your father also to be a Talmid. Otherwise, you'll never uncover this. And he leaves it off as very difficult. He doesn't understand why this is the second to last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. Comes along the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon says, wait a second. There is another Masechta in Shas that ends the exact same way. There is another Masechta in Shas that ends off, Yehi Ratzain Mofanecha Hashem Elokeinu B'Kei B'Seinu Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash M'Hera V'Yameinu V'Sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha. Anybody know which Masechta that is? Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos ends off, Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash M'Hera V'Yameinu V'Sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha. Explains the Vilna Gaon. What is this tefillah? What does it mean to ask Hashem, rebuild the Beis HaMikdash and give us a share in your Torah? Says the Vilna Gaon. Says the Vilna Gaon. It says in Eicha the following pasuk: Tavu ba'aretz she'areha. The gates of Eretz Yisrael, of the Mikdash, have sunk into the earth. Ibad v'shibar brichea. The bolts of Yerushalayim have been destroyed and shattered. Malka, her kings, Bisareha, her princes, Bagoyim, are among the nations. Ain Torah. There is no more Torah, says the pasuk. You hear what the pasuk says in Eicha? Malka, Bisareha, Bagoyim, Ain Torah. That from the day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we have no Torah. Nothing. That's what the pasuk says openly. Not from the day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we don't have a lot of Torah. Not we lost half the Torah. Not we lost the majority of the Torah. From the day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the pasuk says, Ein Torah. Zero, zilch, zippo Torah. No Torah. Says the Vilna Gaon. Pirkei Avos begins, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Pirkei Avos begins that Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah in Har Sinai. But you know how Pirkei Avos ends? Pirkei Avos ends. Despite the fact that Moshe accepted the Torah in Har Sinai, we have nothing left. There's nothing left of the Torah. That's how Pirkei Avos ends. It begins, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, and it ends, bye-bye Torah. When the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, you're gone. Says the Gra, I'm going to answer the question of the Be'er Sheva. The Be'er Sheva wants to know why the second to last Mishnah in Tamid is Yehi Ratzain Sheyibane M'Hera V'Yameinu. That's because he doesn't have the correct girsa. The correct girsa is that it's the last Mishnah Masechta Tamid. Because if you don't have the Beis HaMikdash, you don't have the Torah finished. And that is why we daven. Yehi Ratzain Mofanecha Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash V'Sein Chalkeinu B'Sarasecha. Because together with the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, along with that, will come all the Torah that was lost. The Vilna Gaon takes us further. The Vilna Gaon in Sefer Mishlei, the Vilna Gaon says, on the pasuk in Parak Zayin, pasuk Yates, it says, Ki ein ha'ish bebeisai, halach b'derech merachik. Which means like this: if Hashem is no longer in the Beis HaMikdash, then you know what happened? Halach b'derech merachik. Chachma has departed completely. And what should you do? Tzirar hakesef lakach biyadai. The bundle of money, says the Gra, referring to Torah, he took away. The Torah is sealed. And says the Vilna Gaon, v'af im tiyaga atzmecha lo seda. And even if a person puts in tremendous effort today, they won't crack the surface of understanding Torah. Why not? Says the Gra, ki malka bisareha bagoyim ein Torah. Once the kings of Klal Yisrael, once the Talmid Chachamim went into Galus, the Torah has been taken away from us. Rabbi said, what's that supposed to mean? What do you mean we don't have Torah? Look on the shelves. We have hundreds of books, thousands of books. You have Shas, you have Bavli, you have Yushalmi in every language. You have Rashi, you have Tosfos, you have Marsha, you have Chumash, you have Nevi'im, you have Ksuvim, you have Sifra, Sifri, Mechilta. What do you mean we don't have Torah? What Torah don't we have? And where did this Torah go? So Rabbi say, you're going to be very surprised to hear an almost outrageous concept. And this concept is being introduced to us first in number 14 in a sefer called Sefer HaKrisos. Sefer HaKrisos was written by Rabbeinu Shimshon Mikinain. Rabbeinu Shimshon Mikinain was one of the Bali Tosfos. He was a confidant of the Rashba. He corresponded with the Rashba. Rabbeinu Peretz said that Rabbi Shimshon Mikinain was the greatest Rishon of the generation. He was born in Chinon, France in 1260. And in 1306 he was expelled from northern France. He makes his way to Marseille in southern France. He passes away in 1330. He wrote a sefer called Sefer HaKrisos. Sefer HaKrisos is talking about the transmission of the Torah, the Yud Gimel Midosh HaTorah Nidreshes Bahem, and the methodology of learning Gemara. Says the Sefer HaKrisos. Just bear in mind we're learning the words of Arisha. V'yaschil lefaresh zman amidas hatanoim. I will begin to explain to you the beginning of the period of the Tanoim. May Hillel and May Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were the first recipients of what we call the Tanoim. Shehem HaMekablim. V'HaMekablim mehem ikar anshe Mishnah. Those people who received the oral law from Hillel and Shammai were the primary recipients of the Mishnah. Now, right? Now try to remain seated. Ki ad yemehem hayu sheish meos sidrei Mishnah. Right? If I were to ask you, how many sedarim in Mishnayos? Shisha sidrei Mishnah. Zraim, Mayed, Nashim, Nezikim, Kachim, Taras. Were there more? You'd say, of course there aren't more. We have it all. Says the Sefer HaKrisos, not only were there more, there were 594 more, not Mesechtos, sedarim of Shas. So think of it this way. If there are, 70 volumes of Art Scroll, just for 6 sedarim, right? So for 600 sedarim, you would have 7,000 Art Scroll Gemaras, right? What would you do with it, 7,000. So it says the Sefer HaKrisos, there used to be 600 sedarim in Mishnah. So you say, this is just a medrash, or it's an exaggerated terminology, but we don't know what it means, because who ever heard of the Sefer HaKrisos? We have another Sefer. This Sefer is called Seder Tanom V'Amoraim, and it was brought to me, courtesy of Reb Sal Orbach. Thank you very much. And we have 2 versions of the Seder Tanom V'Amoraim. This is usually printed in the back of the Machzor Vitri, one of the Talmidim of Rashi. Now, when did the 600 sedarim of Mishnah begin? Says the Seder Tanom V'Amoraim, Moshe v'Yad Hillel Hazaken, from Moshe Rabbeinu. By the way, it's very interesting to note, we were trained to think that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wrote down the Mishnah, right? I was surprised to learn, no, he didn't. It was written down thousands of years before him. And the reason we think that he wrote it down, it's Christian influence. The Christians want us to think that it was never written down, and he was the first one to write it down. Says Rav Yitzchak Isaac Halevi in the Daras HaRishonim. It's apikarsus to think that. It was already written down from the times of Anshe Knesset HaGoyim. All Rebbe did was he edited it. But he wasn't the first to write it down. And there's a tshuva on this in the Sri Dayesh, and we're not going to discuss this evening. But that was something I was very surprised to hear. But look what he writes. That from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until Hillel, there were 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. But, May Hillel va'elach, from the time of Hillel and on. Now, does anybody know, when did Hillel live? Hillel lived when? The end of the second Beis Hamikdash, 100 years before Churban Bayesheni. Hillel flourished 100 years before, so we're talking from the year 32 BCE. Second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in 68. Hillel lived 32 BCE. From the time of Hillel, Hani Ha'olam, the world became poor. the Chosha Sarah Shal Torah, and the royalty of Torah became weak. V'loi tiknu mehila v'shamai elashisha sedarim. So from the time of Moshe, there were 600 sedarim of Mishnah. From Hillel and on, we couldn't handle it anymore. To memorize 600 sedarim, 6,000 books, it was too hard. So they only made 6 sedarim. There's another girsa of the Seder Tanam B'Amaram, and that is HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai 600 Sidrei Mishnah. So you say, very nice. I never heard of the Sefer Seder Tanam B'Amaram either. It's one thing you want to bring me a classic source, but these are Rishonim that I never heard of. Rabbi say, it's an open Gemara, black and white. The Gemara Masechta Chagiga Daf Yadal, it says, who are the Balei Mishnah? The Balei Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, V'Chaverav. There is a machlokes between Rav Papa and the Rabbanon. Chad Amar Sheish Me'o Sidrei Mishnah, B'Chad Amar Sheva Me'o Sidrei Mishnah. One man the Amar. So this is not, we're not even dealing with Midrashim over here. We're not dealing with Rishon. This is in a black and white Gemara. Gemara and Chagiga. Right? We missed this one. It flew under the radar. But it's an open black and white Gemara. One opinion is 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. One opinion is 700. So you'll say, but that's an exaggeration. The Gemara doesn't really mean that. Says Rashi. You ever heard of Rashi? Says Rashi, Sheish Me'oi Sidrei Mishnah Hayu B'Yamehen. That in the times of the early Tanam, there were 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Right? Kahati would have had a tough job with that. 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Comes along the Ben Yehoyada, and the Ben Yehoyada says, it's no wonder then that on the crown of a Jew, what's our crown? Tefillin. Oiter Yisrael says tefillin. Tefillin is our crown. What else is the crowning jewel of Klal Yisrael? Not the Tarsha B'Chsav, Tarsha B'Peh, the oral law. Ki al pi advarim ha'eleh karati im chabris. So if we wanted to allude to what our greatest treasure would be, what would we allude to on the tefillin? The oral law. How many sedarim in Mishnah? 600. Shin is 300 on one side. Shin is 300 on the other side. On our crown, we allude to our greatest treasure. Shisha Mea Sidrei Mishnah. In fact, says the Ben Yehoyada, the word sheish has a kri and a ksiv. It could be read shisha. Shisha is 6. But the numerical value is shin, 600. So it could be either 600, that's the way you take each letter, shin, or the way it's read, the kri of it is shisha. The Rebbeinu Shalom says to Klal Yisrael, B'halachta mimi bekeri, you're going to walk with me coldly? Af ani elech imachem b'chamas kri. I will take the word sheish, which is shin, and instead of doing the ksav, we'll make it the kri, which is what? Sheish. Shisha. Instead of taking shin, which is the ksiv, we'll take shisha. By the way, says Ben Yehoyada, the word sheker, shin kofresh, is numerical value, how much? 600. So it's zelu umazel asalekim. 600 is sheker, and what's the ms? The 600 Sidrei Mishnah. That is what the Ben Yehoyada writes. Comes along the Shlah HaKadosh, and the Shlah HaKadosh says, now we understand the first Mishnah, Masechta Pesachim. The original text of the Mishnah, Masechta Pesachim, was much, much longer. It was 100 times longer. And it was talking about all the details of the martef, of the seller. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi redacted it and omitted 99% of the Mishnah. But he left in, Uvema amru beishuros b'martef. Regarding what did they say 2 rows in the cellar, who's the they? The Mishnah Rishona, the original edition of Masechta Pesachim. That is what the Shlah HaKadosh says. Otherwise, the Mishnah is inexplicable. What's the Mishnah doing that? And why did they say 2 rows in the cellar? What cellar? We didn't say anything about a cellar. The answer is the original text of the Mishnah included long details about the halachas of a seller. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi took it out. Now let's just make note of the fact that the Shlach HaKadosh is saying slightly different than the Sefer HaKrisos. The Sefer HaKrisos said we had 600 sedarim in the Mishnah up until who? Hillel and Shammai, 100 years before Choron Bayis Sheni. And the Shlach HaKadosh is saying we had 600 sedarim of the Mishnah up until Rebbe. Does anybody know when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi lived? In the year 188. The Mishnah was redacted in the year 188 of the Common Era. So we have a machlokes over here. The Sefer HaKrisos says that the 600 Sidrei Mishnah began to go in the times of Hillel, in the times of the year 32 BC. The Shlach HaKadosh said no, they began to go in the year 188 CE. This question is asked by the Chida in the Pesach Einayim Masechta Chagiga, where he tries to reconcile these two opinions. But it's clear, Rabbi Isai, that this is not an exaggeration, this is not a medrash, this is not a metaphor. Before the original text of Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, there were 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Anybody ever hear that before? No. I never heard that. See, that's what the Shlah is saying. Otherwise, you can't understand the first Mishnah in Psachim. Comes along this Sefer, a very interesting Sefer. Also, my friend helped me get that. Mr. Orbach helped me get that. A Sefer called Sefer HaPliya. Sefer HaPliya was written by Harav Avigdor Kara, who passed away in Prague in 1439. He was a great Talmudist. He was a great liturgist. By the way, he wrote a famous song. Ever hear the song? Echad Yachid Umiyuchad? Right? It wasn't MBD. Echad Yachid Umiyuchad was written by Rabbi Avigdor Kara. He also, King Wenceslaus the Great, had many conversations with Rabbi Avigdor Kara about religious matters. Very interesting. In any event, many ascribe to him the Sefer called Sefer HaKaneh. Sefer HaKaneh is a famous work of Kabbalah. He writes in the Sefer HaPliya the same thing as the Sefer HaKrisos, that up until the time of Hillel HaZaken, there were 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Rebbeinu Shalom gave to Moshe Rabbeinu 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Now listen to what he writes. He says, the Sefer HaPliya number 22. Whenever you have a Mishnah that seems to be missing words, and you're wondering what happened to those words, and the Gemara is forced to say, Chisure mechzera v'hachi katani, that, you know what, Rebbe left out words, and this is what it meant to say. Now, if you remember, the first night of Shavuos, we offered a pshat of the Tfaras Yisrael and the pshat of the Pachad Yitzchak, what it means Chisure mechzera. Says the Sefer HaPliya, which preceded all of those explanations. Chisure mechzera v'hachi katani doesn't mean Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi forgot to put in words. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi intentionally omitted these words from the original text of the Mishnah. There was an original text that was 100 times bigger than the text we have today. Chisure mechzera, not v'hachi katani, this is what it should say. Chisure mechzera, it's missing v'hachi katani, this is what it did say. That's what it means. Chisure mechzera, the Mishnah is missing v'hachi katani, this is what it said. Rabbi Yehuda omitted it. Now, why would Rabbi Yehuda omit it? Various explanations. We'll just throw out. The Tfaras Yisrael said in order for them to memorize Mishnah, they had to sing it to a certain beat. Right? Right? Mei Masai Koirin, right? They had a nice niggin to sing Mishnah. If the words didn't fit the beat, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had to take out words. That's what the Tfaras Yisrael writes in Masechta Erchin. So we don't know exactly why he took out the words, but one thing we know. Chisure mechzera v'hachi katani, not this is what it should say, this is what it said. Now you'll be surprised to learn that there's a Sefer called Halichos Olam. So you say, okay, this is all conceptual, right? This is all philosophical. Sefer HaKrisos, I never heard of. Seder Tanam Amoram, what's that? A Gemara in Chagiga. I don't know. In Chagiga there are a lot of things about the Ma'aseh Merkava. And then you have the Shla Kadosh. I mean, so there's a sefer called Halichos Olam. Halichos Olam tells you how to learn Gemara. It was written by one of the Rishonim. You ever hear of a man by the name of Maran Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo? He wrote the Shulchan Aruch. He wrote the Beis Yosef. He wrote the Kesef Mishnah. He even wrote Shas Tshuvas Avdas Roichel. You know what else he wrote? He wrote a pirush on the Sefer Halichos Olam. Rabbi Yosef Karo felt that the methodology of learning Gemara that's brought down in Halichos Olam is so important that he wrote a pirush on it. It's called Klolei HaGemara. That I was able to buy this week. That was still available. Says Rabbi Yosef Karo, Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai 600 sedarim of Mishnah. And before the times of Rebbe narrowed it down to 6. You could imagine, you see what Rebbe did was, he condensed all 600 sedarim of Mishnah into 6. He was able to squeeze into every word hundreds of words. Rabbi Yehuda was able to jam-pack, like concentrated orange juice. You have the concentrate, you pour water into it. Shisha Sedarim Mishnah is Mishnah concentrate. It used to be 600 sedarim. Now we have Shisha Sedarim Mishnah concentrate. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was able to jam-pack every word with all the meanings. You see, if you're very careful and you read it with great scrutiny, you read every word, you medayek in every word, you could figure out from each word what the larger body of material was. Says the Beis Yosef. That's how we understand the first Mishnah in Pesachim. When it says, Uvema Amru, Shtei Shuros B'Martev. That's because it's referring to the original text of the Mishnah. Rabbi said, listen to this. There's another commentary on the Sefer Halichos Olam called the Yavin Shmua, written by Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi. Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi was born in 1610. When Shabtai Tzvi began his ill-advised adventures in 1665, the first Gadol B'Yisrael to be Roidev Shabtai Tzvi was the Yavin Shmua, Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi. Ultimately, they had to chase him out of town. They chased Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi out of town. When Shabtai Tzvi converted to Islam, so they called, "Oh, Rabbi, we want you back now." He said, "No thanks." That's Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi. But he said, "I'll send you my son-in-law." whatever that meant. But he did not take the job back. Says Reb Shlomo Al-Ghazi. Okay? I was not familiar with this. We know in the Gemara we have Brisa, we have Tosefta, right? Then you go through yeshiva, you could learn your whole life. You probably never heard what a Brisa is. You probably never heard what a Tosefta is either. I didn't. We always heard a Brisa was taught outside of the house of Rebbe. What does that mean? Says Rav Shlomo Al-Ghazi, I'll tell you what a Brisa is. Rebbe had at his disposal 600 sedarim of Mishnah. He selected the key words, phrases, and halachos to put in the Mishnah. The Brisa are the remnants of the 600 sedarim of the Mishnah. Whatever Brisos the Gemara has are actually Shirayim and remnants from the original 600 sedarim. That's what the Shlomo Al-Ghazi writes explicitly. But what's the Tosefta? Tosefta is added, additional explanation for Mishnah that never appeared earlier in Tanaitic sources. That, says Shlomo Al-Ghazi, is the definitive meaning of Brisa. Brisa is what was once in the 600 sedarim. Tosefta is additions, what was never in the 600 sedarim. That is why, says Rav Shlomo Al-Ghazi, whenever you have a Brisa begins with 2 words. Tanu Rabbanan. You know what Tanu Rabbanan means? The rabbis once learnt before in the 600 sedarim. That's what it means. Now you can't help but think that the Gemara usually doesn't write Tanu Rabbanan. The Gemara writes Taf Reish. Taf Reish is what? 600. So, comes the Likutei Ma'amarim, that's what I was thinking. He writes, Taf Reish is a remez to the 600 original sedarim of Mishnah. So Rabbi say, it's not just the Sefer HaKrisos, it's not just Seder Tanom VaAmoraim, it's not just the Shla HaKadosh, it's not just the Sefer HaPliya, it's the Gemara and Chagiga. It's Rashi and Chagiga. It's the Beis Yosef and the Klalei HaGemara. It's Reb Shlomo Al-Gazi. By the way, it's also Yaakov Ruveni, and also if you look in the Ramami Panoi, it's in Sefer Gilgulei Neshamis, but we won't go there right now. The Chafetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Soloveitchik were once sitting together in an inn, and a person came along and asked, Rabbi, it is well known from Rav Hai Gaon that from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, there were 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. What happened to it? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where is it? So, the Chafetz Chaim, okay, so now it's not just the Beis Yosef. This is something the Chafetz Chaim spoke about. Now, this is recorded in the classic biography of the Chafetz Chaim called Chafetz Chaim Upaloi on page 913. Chafetz Chaim said like this: all the 594 sedarim of Mishnah that we lost, we were able to recover through the chidushim of the Gaonim and the Rishonim, the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, Rashi, K'tzais HaChoshen, Rabbi Kiva Eger, Chasam Sofer, Pnei Yoshua, Marsha, Mishnah Brura, Rav Moshe Feinstein. All the books you see on the shelf are a valiant and successful attempt of restoring the original 600 sedarim of the Mishnah. Says Reb Chaim Soloveitchik to the Chafetz Chaim, I don't agree with that. There's a difference between the original 600 sedarim and what we have in the Gemara today, and all the other chidushim that we have later, from even the Rishonim, Achronim. Whatever you have in the Mishnah, whatever was originally in the 600 sedarim, whatever was in the Gemara, even if you have a dispute, we would apply the rule, Elu v'elu divrei elikim chayim. In some way, they're both right. But all the attempts to restore the glory of the Torah, yes, they're all important, and they all have nekudas ha'emes, and they're all true, but we cannot apply the rule, Elu v'elu divrei elikim chayim. Okay, some food for thought, something very interesting. Rabbi says, so far we have presented two possibilities. It is a granted, it is a presumption, that the original Torah Shabbat Peh had 600 sedarim. You get that? Can you imagine? 600 sedarim. When did it begin to be forgotten? So, the Sefer HaKrisus and the Sefer Tanam Amoraim, they say from the time of Hillel HaZaken, 100 years before the Churban Beis Hamikdash. The Shla HaKadosh, Rabbi Yosef Kari, says no, 200 years after the Common Era, right? In the times of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. But I would venture to say there's a third opinion. If the Vilna Gaon would walk into the room right now, and we were to ask him, Patron of RabbiDG, Eliyahu, there used to be 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. When were they forgotten? I don't think the Gra would say in the times of Hillel HaZaken. And I don't think the Gra would say in the year 188 in the times of Rebbe. I think the Vilna Gaon would say at the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash. After all, this is a common theme in the writings of the Gra. Malka v'sareha b'agoyim ein Torah. That from the time we went into Golos, we don't have Torah anymore. Now what's that supposed to mean we don't have Torah? We do have Torah. So as far as we know, there is only one time in history where Torah was lost. There used to be 600 sedarim, and now there's 6 sedarim. And the Gra is telling me we lost Torah with Churban Beis Hamikdash. So can we then conjecture a third possibility that this Torah, according to the Gra, was lost at Churban Beis Hamikdash? After all, the Gra writes so many times, Malka v'sareh b'agoyim ein Torah. So you say, Glatstein, you're theorizing, you're conjecturing. Do you have any evidence that the Vilna Gaon would disagree with the Sefer HaKrisus, who's a Rishon, who says the Torah was forgotten in times of Hillel? Do we have any evidence the Vilna Gaon would argue on the Beis Yosef, who says it's forgotten in times of Rebbe? So I would venture to say, who could we ask? Who would really know the opinion of the Gra as to when the Torah was forgotten? Who is the primary disciple of the Vilna Gaon? Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Let's see what Rav Chaim Volozhiner asks about, let's see what Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes about this concept of the 600 sedarim of the Mishnah. Comes along Reb Chaim Volozhiner in the Hakdama of the Shnois Eliyahu. The Shnois Eliyahu is the Vilna Gaon's commentary on Seder Zerahim. Says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, look at number 31. Siyag l'Torah v'ikara hi ha'mesaras ha'nimsar lanu ba'al peh. The main Torah that protects Klal Yisrael is the oral law. Uveshvil zois ha-Torah karas ha'kadosh baruch hu brisa yitanu ka'amor ki'al pi hadvarim karati. The main covenant that God has with Klal Yisrael is the oral law. V'kivan shegalu Yisrael. But once Klal Yisrael went into Galus, Malka v'sareha ba'goyim, finish it off, Ein Torah. Who likes to say that? The Gemara loves to say that. The Gemara loves to invoke that. From the time we went into Galus, there's no Torah. V'loi kayin Meira, there is no kayin gadol. Hein gavanu, we've expired. Avanu, we're lost. Torah shabal peh chas v'shalom. We've lost the Torah shabal peh. Lulei Hashem tzavakos hifli chasta yimanu. Had God not acted wondrously with me, God with us, Gam b'yoseinu be'eretz leilanu, Loi ga'alnu, he didn't despise us. When? Mimei Rebbe. Shesidar lanu shisa sidrei Mishnah. Uveruach Hashem asher dibar bai. Through the Spirit of God. Kol al bam kol hataf rei shidrei Mishnah. Rebbe was able to condense all 600 sedarim into 6 sedarim. Says Rav Chaim Volozhiner, when did this process begin? Malka v'sareha b'agoyim ein tar churban Beis HaMikdash. So that is a pretty strong indication that the Gemara would say that the 600 sedarim, maybe it began to go into motion in the times of Hillel, maybe it ended going into motion in the times of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, but the, punch to the solar plexus was when? Churban Beis HaMikdash. But can we really be sure that just because Reb Chaim Volozhiner wrote it, that's what the Gra held? Is there anybody who knew what the Gra held even more than Reb Chaim Volozhiner? Yeah, the Gra himself. No. So let's see what the Gra writes about this concept of there used to be 600 sedarim in the Mishnah. Says the Vilna Gaon. There's a pasuk in Sefer Zechariah. Look at number 32. Vayomer Elai, Hashem says to Zechariah, Ma Torah, what are you looking at? Vayomer, and he said, Ani Raya Megillah Apa, I see a flying scroll. Arka Esrim Ba'ama, 20 amos long. Birach Ba'esrim Ba'ama, 10 amos wide. 20 amos by 10 amos. How many square amos? 200 square amos. Does anybody know what was written on that scroll? Says the Gemara in Daf Chaf Aleph, the Torah Shabal Peh. A Torah Shabal Peh. In fact, the Gemara Erevin says nobody knows how much space the Torah Shabal Peh takes up until Zechariah revealed it to us by saying that he saw a scroll 20 amos by 10 amos, 200 square amos. But says the Gemara, the scroll was folded in half. No. So what used to be 20 by 10 was in effect 20 by 20. How many square amos? 400 square amos. So how much space does the Torah Shabal Peh take up? 400 square amos. How many sedarim were written on those 400 amos, says the Vilna Gaon? 600 sedarim on 400 square amos. But nowadays, how many sedarim do we have? 6. So how many amos does the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah take up? Dalet amos. Says the Vilna Gaon, the old scroll that contained the Torah Shabal Peh took up 400 amos. How many sedarim were on it? 600. But now that the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, says the Gra, and we don't have 600, we have 6. How much space is that taking up? If 600 is on 400, then Shisha Sidrei Mishnah is on 4, says the Vilna Gaon. Miyayim shecharav Beis HaMikdash ein loy lahakadosh baruch hu ela dalid amos shel halacha. It's not the amount of space the person is taking up. It's not the mekaymai shel adam. It's the amount of space Torah Sheba'al Peh takes up today. Says the Vilna Gaon, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, we had 600 sedarim. How much space was that? 400 amos. But nowadays, we only have Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. How much space is that? 4 amos. Says the Gemara, that's exactly what the Gemara means. It's like Nevios. It's unbelievable. Miyayim shechara Beis HaMikdash ein loy la'akadosh baruch hu ela arba amos halacha, because malka b'sareha ba'goyim, we have nothing. But we have 1%? Yeah, we're allowed, if we have 1%, we're allowed to say malka b'sareha ba'goyim ein Torah. Says the Vilna Gaon, the dalit amos of halacha is the amount of space, of parchment it would take to write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh that we have today. And now we understand the tefillah at the end of Shemona Esrei. Ki hiratzai milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu b'kayim v'seinu. Sheyibane Beis HaMikdash. Build the Beis HaMikdash, and you know what will happen then? V'sein chalkeinu b'sayrosecha. Because a large portion of the Torah went lost, according to the Vilna Gaon, with the Churban Beis HaMikdash. How much? 596 amos of Torah. We only left with 4 amos. So we always learn the Gemara, before the Beis HaMikdash was standing, God had so many things. Beis HaMikdash, Araim, Kruvim. No, it's not talking about that. All Hashem cares about is the Torah. Compared to the Torah, nothing has value. So what the Gemara means is, before the Beis HaMikdash was standing, Hashem had 99% of the Torah. Now, all we're left with Dalid, Amos, Shel Halacha, says the Ramon Hakdama to the Torah Sa'olah. Chazal tell us that Talmidei Chachamim that are oisek in Torah, those people are engaged in learning Torah. It's as if the Beis HaMikdash was built in their time. Why? Like the Chafetz Chaim explained. All of our efforts and all of our chidushim and all of our understanding, what we are trying to do is we're trying to restore the 2 shins, the crown of Klal Yisrael, the teferes of Klal Yisrael, which is Parsha Ba'al Peh. And when we put on the tefillin, says the Torah, Leman, what's the purpose of tefillin? The 2 shins, the 600, Leman Tia Taras Hashem, Beficha, to remind you of the Parsha Ba'al Peh. Rabbi say, Yiratzai milfanecha, sheibana Beis HaMikdash meher v'yameinu, sen chalkeinu b'sarasecha. Thank you everyone for coming.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.